He is a donor to Biden's reelection campaign, we should note. George, your reaction to Will Scharf, I could sense that you didn't agree with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is nonsense. I mean, I think if he gets a hung jury here, and I think he's not going to get an acquittal, I think it's going to be because somebody does not make that connection between Trump and these records. But the problem for the defense is he signed some of the checks. He paid very close attention to things that were expenditures made on his behalf. We heard the testimony about Madeline Al-Sahar and the $600 for whatever it was. And we hear, he looked at these things. The backup from the checks that he was signing, they had backup on it, the fake invoice, what it was for. And the point about it is it's not about the Trump talking points here, which you hear from a lot of the lawyers, seems to be basically that unless he was there at the computer and he clicked that on the drop-down menu, like he did it himself, then, beyond a reasonable doubt, acquittal. It's just not the case. The statute says, did he cause this to happen? And if you look at the entirety of the evidence and not look at the way defense lawyers, and spinmeisters look at it, which is to take every little piece and not connect the dots, you can't figure out what the alternative theory is, the alternative theory that would allow a jury to say, well, we have all these facts. They're not really disputed. I think we heard one of the Trump lawyers say it's not, the facts really aren't disputed. What's the innocent explanation for this? And there is none.
He's been here a month. I am disappointed in looking at the supposedly American citizens in that courtroom, that the DA comes in and he acts like it is his Super Bowl. And I guess it is, to be noticed. But that's what's happening in this country.
I have a thought in these presidential debates, which are due to happen soon. President Biden has invited Don Corleone, or whatever his name is, Don Shitsypat, I have no idea what Trump calls himself these days, to take part in the debate. They should have some professionals asking questions. And when I say professionals, those that know a thing or two, like Michael Cohen's lawyer, who had a bit of a set to, George Conway. Can you imagine if we have this live debate and George Conway gets to pose a question? It would be dynamite. Bearing in mind George Conway knows a thing or two, and I get the idea that former loser guys...
It's quote-unquote dirty money to start with. This was all legitimately earned, clean money, so they can't charge anyone with money laundering, but they're trying it in the same way. And, back to this point about the bankers, this never would have gotten through a bank because banks number one, wouldn't have agreed to it in the first place on the face of it, but they will turn down what's called a pass-through account. They will not open an account for you to put money in for it to go out. They make no money off of it, and it's a huge money laundering risk. They filed a suspicious activity report. We know that there were a lot of indicia of a money laundering case here, and they're prosecuting it almost like it is that. And so I think at the end of the day, these invoices are going to come in to prove the falsity. And now Cohen is being brought in to show Trump's direction of it.
Why isn't it bank fraud if you're getting a mortgage with false statements as to, I guess, if you're putting up the money, you're lying about the purpose, but it's okay as long as you're putting up real money?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It wasn't established really on the direct examination that it was going to be a pass-through account. They said it's an LLC. It is an LLC. On the face of it, there's nothing actually incorrect about what Michael Cohen was saying to the banker. It was just that it had to be done quickly. We're starting a new LLC. It wasn't a lie as much as an omission. And remember, we're in state court as opposed to federal court, which really is, it's not to say that the Manhattan DA's office doesn't bring bank fraud cases. They do all the time. But I think that this is a much cleaner case to bring it the way they did. And they obviously didn't want to get into some of the extraneous topics. For example, there are tax issues, there's banking issues, and I think they're trying to bring a pretty sprawling case and make it as narrow as possible.
They are keeping this pretty tight, which makes it really interesting to me, Danny, that they're going into the fact, and I saw you chuckle a little bit, but the idea of creating an invoice for a golf membership or an event. But of course, if you want to remove the Trump name, that doesn't work. Why is all this here?
The sheer hijinks of all of these transactions is really helpful to the prosecution because it's almost Keystone Cops-like, the way these people did business. It's bizarre. And to me, something that really jumps out at me is just how hard Michael Cohen really tried to push this to after the election. And the implication is clear. They were going to stiff her after they got past the election and let her do whatever, which, by the way, begs the question, well, if you weren't worried about it after the election, why not just pay her directly, get into a settlement agreement, and then whatever happens, if it gets traced back to you after the election, so be it. You're certainly not in this position, but they're just too clever for themselves with all of these shenanigans. I mean, it's just remarkable, and I think it helps the prosecution because in many ways, it's just so clumsy. I mean, you really couldn't make up a document like that in a movie where you actually have people handwriting on it. Here's double it up for taxes. I mean, it literally says ×2 for taxes.
Well, it sort of fits with the persona of Michael Cohen. He was not exactly a white shoe lawyer.
Well, this is Weisselberg.
But this Weisselberg,
right? This is Weisselberg.
Well, Weisselberg is,
but even in
it's
money
Michael
laundering,
Cohen and Weisselberg. I mean, these are their conversations about, well, we can do this, but it's a Trump golf course, so that doesn't.
Well, I think if you're talking about hijinks and shenanigans, which I love your use of descriptive words, if I may say, Danny, it's also maybe relatable, or it gives it more credibility when you hear somebody saying, well, I've got 4 prep school tuitions and I've got summer camp. So
I don't know about the prep school business.
Well, prep school costs a lot of money. 70 grand a pop in some schools here in the city. Hey, let me ask about the defense. Why haven't we seen a lot of objections?
That is a question for the ages. There have been many times where I think they could have objected. I mean, even little things. And look, when it comes to the prosecution asking leading questions on direct, that's kind of a judgment call. You don't want to appear to be too that you're hiding anything by objecting too much. There's certainly a strategy there that the more you object, the jury might see you as having something to hide. But that being said, I think I can fairly say that even the judge himself has opined that there aren't enough objections from defense counsel because he said as much. So it's really tough for me to criticize their style of not objecting. But when you don't object, you don't preserve the issue for appeal. And arguably, going back to that Stormy issue, which to me Stormy Daniels' testimony represents really the first and only major appealable issue. A lot of that wasn't objected to. So you have to wonder, to what degree has this been waived on appeal? So, yeah, I mean, not a lot of objections, not sure what the strategy is. I mean, these are all able counsel at the defense table. I am surprised they haven't objected more.
I want to bring in retired New York State Supreme Court Judge Jill Conway, who has known Judge Juan Merchan for 15 years. It's good to see you. And I wonder what you make of this. There's only been really a handful of objections. I mean, the sidebars that we were seeing on some days over and over and over again have not been present. What do you think is going on?
Well, I think defense lawyers have to be careful not to alienate a jury. And one of the ways that they alienate a jury, if they keep popping up and jumping on their feet and objecting and getting sustained objections. I agree with your panelists who said the only issue so far really has been some of the information that was not objected to earlier by Stormy Daniels. That created an issue. But objections are strategic, and judges do not like to get involved in a defense posture or a prosecutor's way of trying their case. They want them to try their cases. They know better than the judge in terms of what they need. So the fact that they are not objecting is strategic, I would think. It is rare for an appellate court to say that a case gets reversed on an evidentiary issue like failing to object. Why they're not, I can't guess. They're going to have free reign on cross-examination whether they object or not, but I suspect they're trying not to alienate the jury.
Well, we certainly saw the surprise from Judge Merchan during the whole Stormy Daniels and he testimony, and he raised some very specific questions about, for example, why you wouldn't object to the conversation about the use of a condom. So how does Judge Merchan approach what we do expect to be very different on cross-examination than we've seen on direct for Michael Cohen?
Well, how the judge should stand down on cross-examination, right? Cross-examination is one way to get at the truth. If you're in my courtroom and you're a defense lawyer, as long as your question is lawful, I'm going to let you ask it. I expect Judge Merchan will do the same thing. There are no rules. Sometimes you heard actually early on in this case, a prosecutor argue it's beyond the scope of the direct examination. That is an objection I would never agree with. Defense lawyers can do or say or ask any question they like so long as it is a lawful question.
Even if there's a very intense back and forth, as a judge, you just got to let it go.
Well, you don't have to let it go. It's a matter of personality also. And if it gets to the point where a witness is being torn down inappropriately, then a judge can certainly say, cool it. But it is the tone that he or she may decide is inappropriate, but not the question itself, unless it's a lawless question.
Jill Konviser, it's always good to see you and talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go back in the courtroom. Additional call at 7:23 p.m. between Weisselberg and Cohen. This is on October 25th, 2016. Hoffinger says this is a call between, Cohen says first, Weisselberg and Cohen, had to do with the Stormy Daniels matter, significantly urgent. Hoffinger then asked about a call between Keith Schiller, Donald Trump's body man, the very, very tall guy you remember back from 2016, and Cohen on October 25th, 2016. Cohen says, I called Mr. Schiller. Cohen says, because I needed to speak to Mr. Trump and knew that Keith Schiller was with him to discuss the Stormy Daniels matter and the resolution of it. By the way, Donald Trump and Keith Schiller were always together. There was never anywhere that Donald Trump went that
well, there was
Schiller
testimony
was
last week from Stormy Daniels that Schiller was outside the door when they had their assignation.
They were locked hip to hip for every time that I saw Donald Trump, Keith was there. What was the plan for how you would fund the essential consultants account, Hoffinger asks. Cohen says, so I had already, for several months at First Republic Bank, before all of this, had a HELOC on my apartment, and that account was paperless, meaning that we wouldn't receive any documents in the mail. Cohen said, and I elected to use money that was in the HELOC because my wife, who was the CEO of the household, would not understand if there was 130 grand missing from our joint bank account. I can understand that. She would ask me, and that would clearly be a problem for me. Cohen says, when Trump paid me back, I would deposit it, and nobody would be the wiser. Cohen says if this matter wasn't resolved, it was going to be catastrophic to Mr. Trump and the campaign. Hoffinger asked, did you have a call on October 25th with DH and Pecker? Cohen says it was all about the resolution of the NDA. Cohen says this will further isolate women from the candidate. Hoffinger, did you make a request of that time of Mr. Pecker on that call? Cohen says if he would be kind enough to make the payment. Cohen, I figured why not ask? Hoffinger, what did he say? Not a chance, says Cohen. Hoffinger, did he say why?